Today's episode is brought to you on the country of Wandjamaja in the Yindinji land of Far North Queensland, south of Cairns, in the village of Babinda. We'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners, past, present, and those exciting new future leaders coming forward. Thank you. Okay, welcome to the Arts Nexus Studio. I am so excited to introduce you to Marley Holloway-Clarke, who has just arrived all the way from Melbourne. And even though it's pouring with rain here, it's a slightly different temperature than Melbourne's rain. And I'm really excited. I've been getting to know Marley this morning, and you've just got so many great stories to tell and books in your personal library already. I can't believe your achievements at such a young age. And I'm really impressed to meet you and just, inspired, thinking, gee, have I done enough in this world? Marley, look, we, rather than jumping forward too quickly, just give us a quick recap of who you are and how you got to be here.
Well, again, my name is Marley Holloway-Clarke. I always start by introducing myself that way because I was even just saying people always mishear my name, but there's not many Holloway-Clarkes in my family. There's only 3 of us. Marley Holloway-Clarke. I'm 25 years old. I am a Nyamal person from the Pilbara region, and so I'm Aboriginal and Chinese. My mum is non-Indigenous, and so I grew up kind of all over the show, like down in Tassie, did a lot of my high schooling, and then moved to Melbourne for my higher ed. But spent a lot of my early years in the Northern Territory between different communities. Like my dad's a chippy, so moving to different communities for his work and when we were younger. So I did move around a lot, settled in Tassie with my mum and spent a lot of my high schooling down there and learning as a scholarship kid, like navigating the world as an Indigenous person in a place like Tasmania. And so I was very fortunate to come to the University of Melbourne as a student and go to art school down there. So I spent the last 8 years in Melbourne just doing my thing and getting to know people.
To hear your intercultural story as well is pretty special because you've ended up not just a scholarship student, you are a master's recipient. What do they call that? You're a carrier. How do they describe you as a master's person?
I'm not quite sure. I just love to tell people I have my master's, just so everyone knows that. And because I come from a very competitive family, and education's been really important. And so I always like to boast that out of all my siblings, I've only got 2 others, but I was the first to get my master's out of both of them. Wow. So I just like to think that I'm the master of it.
Master of all things.
I've been at the university for 7 years. I spent my first year in Victoria as an art tech, working at one of the private schools in Geelong.
Right.
And so just helping with home ec classes, setting up paint and screen printing and stuff for the kids, which that was wild amount of stuff that they got to do at that school. But so I really immersed myself in the university life of I worked at the student union, I went to a college as well, I went to university off campus and then came back to campus when I did my master's, but working casually there and now full time and doing more research now, and so very much the same, and feels like I've been at the university and part of the furniture now. But
there are people that I think never leave, and you see them walking around and you go, that person's never been in the real world. They just and it is one of those places where like-minded people that are on the same groove. I don't know, university is kind of a magnet for that. It's so that whole thing of schooling is an interesting phenomenon, isn't it? How we went at school, where we recognised for who we were, and then where we end up as adults depends on that higher ed bit, doesn't it, in a way? It's a bridge.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And even in that, and comparing me to my siblings, I struggled a lot during primary school and high school. I wasn't really engaged traditionally like I knew what was happening, but to an extent I was so shy. I didn't know how to ask questions or when to ask questions, or I felt so embarrassed and ashamed to talk in front of my class that I would just sit silently or Google things by myself and ask like my best friend in class if they could ask a question for me. So I really struggled a lot to engage that way, and I was always behind, and so I didn't even think I'd go to university. Whereas like my brother, he was very smart and engaged that way, but also he was kind of that step ahead. He didn't see the point in just submitting like little assignments here and there. Like he'd still ace all of his work.
Yeah.
But once he got into uni, he got into a full scholarship to go to University of Melbourne. And he somehow convinced me to apply for VCA to the art school, and because he's like, oh, you don't need, it's not super traditional academic, like you go in your portfolio, you have an interview and all that stuff. And so I was like, okay, sounds good. Put my portfolio in. Yeah, didn't think anything of it because I had never heard of VCA. I'd never heard of like University of Melbourne or any art school like that. Didn't think it was a possibility. And so when I got an interview and I then got in, I was like, okay, this is pretty cool. Yeah, I didn't think much of it. And having 22 people in my class out of like thousands of applicants didn't really hit me until I was almost finished. And especially one of the only Indigenous people in my cohort as well was pretty wild, pretty isolating most times, but it happened. I went to VCA.
I think that's amazing. So we've found a lot of similarities because I was born and bred Melbourne, and so when you talk about things in Melbourne and the campus and activating spaces and all those things are really normal to people in Melbourne, and up here in Cairns it's a bit, activate? What's that? A festival? And I'm like, a bit more than that. So I'm really interested in that. You ended up VCA across to Melbourne Uni. Now that's still a bit of a leap.
Yeah.
Melbourne Uni being like this kind of Yale, Harvard of Australia, really, isn't it, in a lot of ways as a university?
Yeah, and that's something I didn't realise. I don't know if that's just me being ignorant in that sense of like higher education, but it never seemed really unattainable. And I think that was because of my parents and really pushing like you can be in those positions if you want to be, and if you apply yourself, that it is attainable and you can get there if you want to be there, and you can stay there as well if you want to be. And that's something I never really thought was a barrier for a long time, until kind of getting a little bit older and realising, a little bit like naive and ignorant of me being younger, not realising how prestigious and how important it was, and especially, again, like being at VCA and being at the University of Melbourne, there are not many Indigenous people that have that opportunity or even think it's a possibility. And that's something I really took for granted when I was younger, and in the trenches, as people say, of studying and doing those long nights and getting caught up in the university life and realising it's not for everyone. Even though I didn't enjoy a lot of the time being at VCA just for challenges and butting heads with a lot of my teachers and about the stuff that I was trying to produce work about and they didn't quite understand. And that, I don't know if now looking back, I know it was definitely a big culture difference. But yeah, kind of getting wrapped up in that and realising that my parents had instilled in me from a very young age that like anything was really possible, and really push education as like a gateway into a lot of different opportunities and areas.
It's very true, that idea of I have the right to do that is not actually a law or something you can even, it's an attitude about, like last week, I took my dear friend to a 5-star resort, and we just walked through, and if we wanted to, we would have swum in that pool and we would have had lunch at that bar in the pool. We can do that. Like, as anyone has the right to. Well, technically there's a sign that says only guests, but I didn't ever see that sign. But
ignorance is bliss.
But it is the point of, if I want that, I can make that happen. And that is an interesting glass ceiling for some people, isn't it? And so you busted through. Not only did you go to VCA, which is, again, something amazing for people, because I did go to a music-dedicated school, and a lot of people dreamt of getting into VCA, by the way, and didn't get in. Then I even auditioned to go to Melbourne Uni Music and didn't get in. But we won't talk about that because that's probably a therapy session. But
Next time.
next time. So you went from VCA to Melbourne Uni.
Yeah.
To then, before 25 or by 25, achieve your masters.
Yeah.
That's another level.
Yeah, I don't know what energy I had back then, but I'm 25. I'm 26 this year, and I finished my masters in mid-2019. So I was, still pretty fresh and got my little baby face. And so, I realised I was one of the youngest people in all my classes, and most of my friends that are in their 30s now are not realising that I think I was 22 when I first started my masters, and everyone, they thought I was their age as well, and I thought they were my age, and we were just hanging out. But realising they've got kids and jobs and houses, and I was like, I still live at college. And
I'm going to imagine to do a master's, you had something to say.
Yeah.
You have to have a very clear focus, don't you?
Yeah, I like to say I'm starting to become a professional opinion giver. And hopefully people start paying me for that. And
is there a club I can join? I think that's a good club.
Yeah, I'll put in my little Twitter bio.
Yeah, I reckon that's a hashtag for sure. So that's the other thing too so we won't go into that necessarily because that's quite another whole big topic area. But you now work at the university under an amazing woman. Perhaps you'd like to tell us a little bit about Kathy.
Yeah, so I work at the University of Melbourne. I have kind of two roles there. I work at the Indigenous Centre Morak Barak under Nala Cooper, and then I also work at the Melbourne Centre for Cities, which is under Kathy Oak. And I've worked on different projects with her, and she kind of just approaches me when she's got something on the go, and she's like, do you want to be a part of this? But she's very good at selling things. And so I always will say yes, even after some convincing. But the project I'm working on is looking at Indigenous-led research within the university scene at Melbourne as well as over in Toronto. Wow. So we've got a partnership with Heather Torres, who's part of the School of Cities at the University of Toronto. And so we're trying to look at getting more Indigenous people into higher education in those spaces for sustainability and working with the Indigenous-led research as well. So it's really big, and I'm trying my best to do it justice and work with everyone that they feel happy and supported and listened to, because it's not an easy thing to start doing. I'm only doing it one day a week at the moment and trying to get some more money. So if anyone out there want to give us money, so
yay! There's a call out. Sponsors, philanthropists.
Yeah,
that's a very important thing to be doing. And I think that goes back to what you were talking before about the right to education, because we know now that education is the clear difference for women, for disadvantaged or disenfranchised groups, for young people that are I've only reared one child direct and a couple of other stepkids and adopted other ones, and other ones I just have brought along with me all the way along. I've had a lot of interns and trainees all the way through my career. I've made sure there's always been someone to shadow. And the key difference I've always found is them not feeling they had the right to do something and not knowing that university is nothing like high school. Zero like high school. Like, it is exciting and dynamic, and if you've got one tiny little subject that you love, like green lichen on rainforest rocks, I'm just looking at our picture here, if that's your one thing, you will find an entire department of people that are studying just that. And and all of a sudden you find yourself in the middle of all these like-minded people that sit around in the bars of uni pontificating on lichen on rocks or whatever it is you think. And that's the bit I think people don't realise, isn't it? That
Yeah, there's a lot of like-minded people, and you tend to find your community of people within a space like that, and acknowledging education on different levels as well. And like, yes, there's like the university education, there's also life university that people say, and like getting experience that way, and just being able to develop your skills, your talking, and the way that your ideas are developed as well. And it really goes hand in hand with that confidence. And because I'm having this like battle at the moment as well, if I want to do a PhD or not, and what's the actual point of it, and do I need to do it, but then understanding why it's there, what it's for, and who it's benefiting and stuff like that, and looking at if I can still do the work that I want to do without a PhD, and navigating the world as an Indigenous person in a Western institution is really hard. As well as like a place like University of Melbourne is known for researching Indigenous people, and like that's why I did a lot of my masters in, is like repatriation, a lot of heavy stuff like that as well, and understanding my positionality of an Indigenous person and a female in a space like that is really hard, and seeing other mob going through that and realising maybe it's not for them, and if they want to do some traineeship, but like education in a sense can be anything that you make it to be, as long as you're learning and you're developing and really kind of finding your people and talking about ideas. And that's something I've been really fortunate, being a part of the University of Melbourne student community. It was really helpful, because I think that's where all my friends are. We would sit around, go to the bar, and just chat about our life experiences and learning from each other, and realising we had a lot of very similar upbringings and experiences even in our classes. And Barak, as because it's very student facing and like a lot of student support there, we just sit in the common room, have some snacks, gossip, and like talk about our experiences, our little safe place within the university. It's where we found our friends, and like I've got lifelong friends now that like they're starting to talk about, well, something happens to me, you're looking after my kid. I was like,
Well, having come forward and out the other end and a couple of decades on, I can tell you those friends are truly lifelong. And there's still, I got one, this friend still rings me to this day on my birthday, and I have no idea, like 35 years later, how they even remember it's my birthday. But anyway, there they are.
Yeah, wow.
So just before we move on though, climate justice is Kathy's thing, right?
Yeah, a bit of it. Yeah, she's got a hat for many different things that she's involved in, but my project with her is a lot to do with climate justice and resilience, and within cities, and First Nations knowledge within those cityscapes.
Wow.
As well.
So that's groundbreaking, strangely. Like we were talking about that today, about how simple some things can be, like not acknowledging country because the script says you've got to say these words, but actually truly acknowledging where we are and the beauty of that, and the fortunate situation we are to have that to even acknowledge. So climate justice, turns out we have some commonalities around social media. So we're both strangely comms marketing people, quietly behind the scenes I am, but you're a bit more in a position of that. And we follow some people, and one of them is a gorgeous friend of mine, Waniki, who has I've known since a baby, and now all of a sudden as a young person she's become this dynamo. And meanwhile, all the way down in Melbourne, you've been following her on all the different things, all the different platforms. So young people speaking out has become a real thing lately, hasn't it, with Greta? And we've got one up here, Molly. I don't know if you've heard about Molly Steer. So Molly got things changed. She got plastic straws taken out of schools across Queensland, I believe. Started just her school. Then she went to the Cairns Council, got the council to get rid of plastic straws through their outlets. And then all the schools followed, and now it's become a thing. And she's now 14. And
young people.
Young people. Oh, my gosh.
Oh, the youths.
Yeah, I've got another one. She wants to get good food for children in restaurants.
Yeah, that's actually,
how is that not a thing?
Yeah, really randomly, like when I went out for dinner last night, looking at the kids' menu, it's like chips and nuggets.
That's what she wants to ban, nuggets.
Yeah, like I like chips and nuggets, but I'm also grown. I'm an adult, I can have broccoli the next day. But like kids, I never realised that kids only consume what their parents give them. And even thinking about, like, if a kid's thirsty, well, you have to give them a cup of water. They won't go and get it themselves because it's not part of their day-to-day life. But yeah, that's a really interesting way of looking at it, like accessible food and healthy food. And it starts from early age because, even having like a single mum working so much, we normally either had like takeaway or had to fend for ourselves. Fend for ourselves isn't just getting something from the fridge, but Not like
out the back.
Yeah, but I never really thought about it like that, and it's really interesting, especially like having young people really taking the reins for a lot of these issues, because it's going to be our planet, our country, our everything, waterways to like look after in the future. Like a little bit sad, but it's going to be us making those decisions.
Considering the only person really on this planet that has enough money to do what he damn well wants, and he wants to go to Mars, is the craziest thing for me in the world, that with all that resources, money and human resources around him, he can't think of a way to save our planet, like instead of looking for plan B.
Bit of a band-aid for a solution that can be fixed with all your money.
With all your money, put it over here. Oh, well, we just had it too with the last election, another big mogul spending all that money on a campaign that would have actually fed and housed and supported so many people. I just find that shifting of resources. So a couple more things before we go. You've got a cat.
I do have a cat.
And what's your cat's name?
Her name is Momo, so Momo, named after a character from Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Ah, yes.
I'm a massive nerd for that show, and I've got a couple of tattoos for it.
Oh, yeah.
But so big green eyes, and she's a white tabby cat. She's 3.5. She's the love of my life.
Yeah, that's what happened. I had a cat when I lived in inner city Melbourne. I was Clifton Hill, and my cat's name was Romeo, because there was a movie at the time where this very gorgeous 30-something woman had a cat called Romeo, and I went, I want to be just like her. Films were a big influence for me, as it turns out. But a couple of other things. So we have toilets in common as well.
Yeah.
Well, kind of.
Yeah, festival scenes and toilets, and how that works within sustainability, and like leaving people, like having footprints at festivals and caring for country, and making sure people just pick up their rubbish. Like, it's so simple, but no one remember. Like, I see people chucking rubbish all over the floor all the time. Breaks my heart, but...
Yeah. Well, I've been known to chase cars down the highway. Like, you drop this. My kids know that. My stepdaughter. So, yeah, I think I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes to festival toilets, and a lot of my photos when I go to a festival won't be of the headliner or anything like that. It'll be the side installations, the toilet system. Particularly love Womadelaide. They have this whole... I don't think they do it on purpose, but... the way the bins are taken through the site, it's like a dance, because they're trying to be unobtrusive. So they kind of keep together in a row, and you'll see this like 6 guys in the bin, and then they'll go and do the red ones, and then they'll do the yellow ones. And then they're always making sure the caps now that describe what goes in where, because sometimes it's as basic as that.
Yeah.
But we've got a self-managing festival system that I've got a very dear colleague that I'm going to introduce you to, who's in Melbourne, who works with the Burning Man International Tribe, and they're now starting events here. But he's got a theory that you shouldn't have any bins on site. Like, if you don't provide the actual receptacle to put the rubbish in, then you're forced to work out what to do with it. And I've been on festival sites I've managed where I wanted to get rid of all the little bins and take away that idea of the amount of work that takes to manage and how quickly they overflow. So I put big skip bins, but then they overflowed, and because it was a bin, people would just leave stuff around it. Of course it was a really pristine outdoor site up in very important country. It was in the middle of very, very strong connection country with 1,000 galleries, they call it. Like, all the rock art was all around. Like, it's very special country up there at Laura, and people leaving piles and piles of rubbish. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, it's really sad, because the festival that I've been to the most is Falls Festival, and they've since now cancelled the Lutruwita leg down at Marion Bay, which is my favourite. It's what I did every year for New Year's for almost 5 years in a row.
And they don't have it anymore.
Yeah, I don't. I think their reasoning is a little bit how you going, but it was one of the best things to happen for young people in Tasmania, because that's what you did over New Year's. There's nothing else to do, so now the cities are flooded, all these young people running amok. But that was something we realised during the cleanup, and because it's a full 3-day camping festival, people they'd be given bags at the start of it, which was really helpful, and they had volunteers going through exactly what bag was for what. So like food scraps, recyclables, general waste, all that stuff. But people would just leave those bags tied up in a pile on their campsite, and then expect the festival workers to go around and pick them all up, or they'd leave full-fledged camping gear like chairs and actual tents just fully working on the ground there. And so that's something that Falls did down there, was they had collected up all the camping gear, either pulled it apart or making sure what was working, and they'd resell it the next year, or have it as like a little grab what you can. And my mum and I, because we're just like free stuff, so we'd walk around and grab all the free stuff.
Of course, very conscientiously upcycling.
Yeah, upcycling. It's the new thing nowadays. But yeah, it's something, and like with even the toilet system up at Marion Bay, like it is all just drop toilets up there, and they're maintained on site because it's someone's private property that they leased out to the festival. But it's so interesting seeing how they manage the sites and the remoteness, because even you talk about Laura Festival and down at Falls and Marion Bay, it is still like 3.5 hours from like a major city.
Wow.
And looking at bringing in the rubbish management for that site, or taking out the rubbish, but looking at the water usage, and they have to get all the water, because there's no natural, there's like the ocean, but there's not enough natural streams in that area of Marion Bay to maintain the water supply for that many thousands of people.
Yeah. People have no idea of the cubic square meterage of water wastage. That when you talk about a festival site and people complain because there's not enough toilet paper, which has become a thing now since COVID. But now I think people will really appreciate bring your own for a start. But the whole idea of where do the things go that you consume while you're on a festival that is not, well, actually any festival, when I think about the stadiums and wherever we used to gather en masse. And now we fully appreciate the ability to do that. We were taking that so for granted. And I think the next level is to think about the footprint that those particular events, and I have to say the thing that's a little bit being my bonnet at the moment is conferences.
Yeah.
I think of the carbon footprint, for a start, internationally, when people leave their workplaces, so that leaves a gap behind. It's often in a resource management situation. Someone's got to pick that slack up. Then they're all flown, with all due respect, often on a bit of a junket. They're just there because work made them go, and then they eat incredible amounts of food, mostly wasted, and we know that up here in Cairns a lot because it's a big mecca for conferences. But I think through COVID we've now really thought twice about, do we have to do this all the time like this? So I've now had the pleasure of attending a few online conferences that are live, but they're live streaming it out. And the one I went to last week, I was really conscious to dedicate 3 days to sitting, which is very hard to do. So I have to set myself up to do that. Like I have to make sure I've got my little doodle pad and my snacks and attend as if I was in that conference, so that I don't take it for granted. But yeah, you're here for a conference, talking of which sounds like an amazing conference. I'm a bit jealous.
It's something that I hadn't put on my 2022 bingo this year, as I just saw it on Instagram. And it's through Indigenous X, and it was just promoted. I saw it on a couple of people's, and because I do marketing communications, it's my main job, but I love Instagram and TikTok and YouTube and all the social platforms. I had a bunch of friends actually sending it to me, like, oh, you should do this, you should apply. So yeah, I just applied randomly. It took me like 2 seconds and then forgot about it because I was doing a bunch of other things at the same time. And then, I got an email from them saying that I got accepted into the program to go to the content, I think it's like a content creators meetup. I think that's what they're posing it as, but it's with a journalism foundation as well. So I think they're, I think it's like Judith Nielsen. I might be pronouncing that wrong, but they're sponsored half the event. But even just listening to what you're saying about conferences, and because it's at the Hilton, it's a little bit flash, and so I don't know who's putting all that money up, but it's even just thinking about how big corporations like the Hilton have, I looked on their website their function spaces are purposely built to get guests to book their spaces, to then have people eating at their restaurants, booking their rooms, booking the conference spaces, and they run tours out of there. And
we call it's a thing called vertical marketing, and it's rife up here to the point that an offshore company will own even the plane that flies them in, all the cruise ship. All those little buses that then take them off to somewhere has some sort of ownership. Then the place they go to, even the markets they go to, which is a thing in all first and third world countries about where your tour guide takes you, where the kickbacks are. And even though they may be technically local owned, there's ownership in there. So, yeah, that vertical marketing, why it's a thing for me, not because I'm criticising tourism and conventions. I think the MICE industry is amazing and really drives a lot of people to places they wouldn't always go to. And I'm really interested in the ones that go regional. But even then I think of the impact on a place that doesn't normally have that many people come in. But, yeah, cultural tourism is a big thing for me. Not in a way that is written about by all of the academics. There's a whole new thought about cultural tourism is much broader than just seeing Aboriginal dances when you arrive, which, you know, people would tick, did that.
It's done on culture now.
And it's just much, much more. What you've done today, for me, is really the most amazing thing, like to be able to come into a town. For me, anyway, I use myself as a benchmark, so I just figure everyone would like to do that, and then drive quite a way. Even though there was grey clouds, I was
looking at everything. I was sitting on the sugar cane, looking at the big hills and all the cars driving past. But yeah, it's so interesting, and like looking at how people approach like tourism in itself. And even though I'm up here for a conference, but finding every little time in between to do something that really like either feeds my soul or will impact the world around me in different ways as well, and looking at that really respectful engagement and making sure like for a conference you can, like the vertical marketing, you can really change the way people are doing things and engaging with certain companies and cultural tours and groups of people in a really respectful and appropriate way that is actually beneficial for everyone, and not just the big third party, like the big party that's paying for everything and benefiting the most. And the Indigenous like business market, especially in tourism, is wild. And seeing how important that is, and because I think there was another conference recently up here for Indigenous tourism.
A couple of days ago. I mean, our conference circuit is
it's
huge.
Insane. Seeing all the, no wonder like all the hotels
junkets.
Out.
They want to get to Cairns. It's not because the conference it's particularly great. I mean, I'm sure the conference facilities here are fabulous. I'm not taking away, but it's because the sideline is it's Cairns, you know, and it's not like they're going to go, ooh, I'm going to go to Mount Isa for a conference, you know, like I'd go to Mount Isa for a conference.
Somewhere different,
somewhere different. But yeah, so I think it's for young people to see things a little bit more with open eyes and questioning, as opposed to as you get a bit older, you get, oh, well, that's just the way it is. It's how we do conferences. So that's our personal challenge out there. If you're a conference organiser or a festival event organiser, really question the paradigm of where you're working in. How else can you do it? Is there another way to make it accessible for other people that maybe can't get there? You can be down the road and not be able to get here.
Yeah, you know? And like financial burden for fun activities is like a real thing, and looking at accessibility, like financial accessibility, but also physical accessibility. If you need to have more Auslan interpreters, or just even getting people on board to fill those gaps in knowledge is really important, and broadening your staff to fill those gaps so those opportunities aren't missed for people. Because the same thing, like someone down the road might not be able to afford to even come or even have a car to or something like that, but does that mean that they get to miss out on such an amazing experience? Like, and who gets to decide that?
Well, that's a little bit of the way that I infiltrate the world in my tiny, tiny little way. So as an event manager, so this is really how we have connected, because I work with the Cairns Tropical Writers Festival. You were hoping to come to it. And so that got our kind of colleagues talking, and they said, oh, you're going to meet this Marley. I'm like, oh, what day? Tuesday. Oh, change some things, and then we made it happen. And then you've gone, oh, I'm going to Babinda, and here we are. But really, at the heart of it, working with writers' festivals for me has been, and visiting them around the world, has been great eye opener and pleasure, because it's where the thinkers are. And I always say leaders are readers. And so all you kids out there, every secret in the entire world is inside a book.
Yeah.
You just got to find the book, right?
Yeah.
And then you know every secret in the world. And that is, I'm not making that up. But even Harry Potter will tell you that.
I know.
There you go.
Yeah.
So the thing is, though, that we've started, our festivals are always inside those resorts. So we've always, like the Hilton was one, so I know that venue inside out. And they always try to treat us like we're a conference, because we're essentially a speaking event. So it's like conferencing, but it's at such a deeper level, and people are really concentrated, and they're there for pleasure, and they're meeting their heroes. Like writers' festivals are full of groupies in linen. Groupies in linen, I call them. And I, with all due respect, I love you all. But the volunteers, for me, are a really underestimated group of people. First of all, for me, they're marketing megaphones. And if they had a good time, everyone in their circle for the next year will hear about it. And they often then progress up to become committee members or even crew, and will start getting paid. But it is, for me, where I often bring people into something that they would never, ever normally go to. Is that all it is? It's just a bunch of people sitting around talking and listening to really interesting people.
Pretty much.
And everyone will talk to you, because they all think you're maybe a writer or interesting.
Networking is the next best thing at conferences and events. And
we need a better word for it, though, because I've got a little bit...
it's all gross. Networking, I just like having a yarn and having a chat to people. And
yarn up, I love that word. That feels so much more... Well, because I have a bit to do with craftivists too, that... like the knitting nanas. I've got to make sure that Kathy knows about the knitting nanas, because they rock. Anyway, so we could probably talk a long time, because, you do remind me a little bit of myself. I miss that time, Melbourne and uni and inner city and people and festival.
Yeah, very flash living. Like in the last couple of weeks, I've just been flat chat with so many different things. Like I went to Rising because, my friend was working, and so he said, well, I'm working at the Rink Dink, come along. And I was like, okay. Yeah. So I went to that and brought my mum, and then 6 other people along to that. And so, massive megaphones for that. And going to all the different events. And since COVID kind of shut Melbourne down so severely, everything's opening back up. I've had an event every second day for the last month and a half.
Yeah, I find it crazy when people say to me, I just don't know what to do this weekend. I'm going, really? I don't even know what to start with. But I think that would be, if I was to give a message to the world, it'd be say yes.
Yeah. Say yes.
Whatever some random person like me or you walks up, or Kathy, walks up and says, hey, you should do this. And most people I know either cross the road when they see me coming, because they just know she's going to ask me to do something, or they say yes, and they regret it usually after if they don't.
Well, you wouldn't be here recording a podcast if you didn't say yes. So.
No, that's it.
Yeah, it's something I didn't realise for a long time, that people know me as the person that will say yes to things. I just will always say yes because it sounds fun. Or
why not?
Yeah, why not? Exactly. What am I going to lose? So I didn't realise how important and how powerful it is to actually just do something and say yes, and you'll learn something, or something good about yourself or something bad about yourself, and figure it out.
But, goes right back to your brother daring you to put that submission in. My God, look where you came out of that. That's an incredible journey. Thank you really so much for sharing. And I think, I don't know what the saying is, but this year's NAIDOC week theme is...
I think it's get up, stand up,
show up.
Show up.
That's the third one.
Yeah.
And that showing up is... the difference. It really changes your life. It does. And I'm just so pleased to meet you. It's great.
It's been great. I've had such a good time this morning and getting to like see the countryside, and as I'm a big city person now, but yeah, it's been great to be able to see trees like properly.
Yeah, really.
I forget how much I miss like nature and just being out there. Even though it was raining this morning, it was still nice just to feel rain, and I put my feet in the water and just be out in country, and it's been nice. And
Now you've had a really amazing experience. So I'm really pleased to have met you, and thank you for coming to have a look at our little studio.
Well, thank you for the invite. I always say yes. So next time I'll be back. Don't you worry.
Thank you. And now cut to some groovy music. Oh, we can put the headphones on. Wow, thank you. Yeah, I think there's lots to talk about.
Oh, back at you. Like,
very cool.
very mutual.
Very,
Having you
cool.
here, best sound tech.
Thank you.